Have you ever wondered why those motorcycles from CHiPs look so different from regular police bikes? Or why California Highway Patrol officers rode the same model for over 2 decades, while everything else around them changed? The Kawasaki KZP wasn't just another police motorcycle. It was a cultural phenomenon that started as a civilian sport bike and somehow became the most recognizable law enforcement vehicle of the 80s and 90s. Today we're counting down 20 weird facts about these legendary machines that patrolled California's highways and defined an era of American policing. Some of these will make you appreciate the engineering, others will make you question the logic, and a few might just blow your mind. So buckle up and hit that subscribe button, because this ride through motorcycle history is about to get interesting. Number 20. The first police Kawasaki wasn't even a police bike. The police-use Kawasaki line that would become legendary started in 1975 with a 900cc bike known as the Z1P. But here's the weird part. It wasn't built as a police motorcycle at all. It was literally just a regular Z1 civilian bike that someone decided to slap police equipment onto. No special modifications, no reinforced frame, no upgraded electrical system, just a standard street bike with lights and a siren bolted on. The California Highway Patrol and other departments were basically riding modified civilian motorcycles and pretending they were purpose-built law enforcement vehicles. It's like taking your Honda Civic, putting a light bar on top, and calling it a police cruiser. The fact that this actually worked well enough to spawn an entire line of police motorcycles is kind of mind-blowing. These makeshift cop bikes proved so successful that Kawasaki eventually said, you know what, maybe we should actually build real police motorcycles. And that's exactly what they did. But for those first couple of years, officers were essentially riding souped-up street bikes into high-speed pursuits. Talk about making do with what you've got. Number 19. Not all. CHiPs bikes were actually 1000cc. Here's something that'll mess with CHiPs fans' heads. Not all those iconic California Highway Patrol motorcycles were actually 1000cc bikes. The first factory-built police special Kawasaki was the KZ 900, introduced around 1977. That's right, 900cc, not 1000. For several years, the CHP and the public associated with the show were actually looking at 900cc machines. The 1000cc versions didn't become standard until later. But here's where it gets really confusing, because CHiPs ran from 1977 to 1983. The show featured both 900 and 1000cc models throughout its run, sometimes in the same episode. Most viewers never noticed the difference. The bikes looked virtually identical from the outside. Same fairings, same lights, same basic design. Unless you were reading the tiny badge on the engine or really knew your motorcycles, you'd never spot the difference. Even today, people refer to all CHiPs bikes as KZ 1000s when many of them weren't. It's become such an ingrained misconception that even some motorcycle historians get it wrong. The 900cc models were actually perfectly capable police bikes, just slightly less powerful than their bigger brothers that would follow. Number 18. The production run lasted an insane 23 years. The official 1000cc police model, the Kawasaki KZ 1000P, had one of the longest production runs in motorcycle history. 23 years. Think about that for a second. From 1982 to 2005, that's longer than most car models survive, longer than entire motorcycle companies stay in business. Through multiple decades of technological advancement, changing safety standards, and evolving police tactics, Kawasaki just kept churning out essentially the same bike. The core design stayed largely unchanged for all those years. Sure, they made minor tweaks here and there, updated the electronics a bit, changed some components, but fundamentally, a cop riding a KZ 1000P in 1982 was riding the same basic machine as one in 2005. That's absolutely wild when you think about how much everything else changed during that time. Personal computers went from novelties to necessities. The internet was invented and became ubiquitous. Cell phones went from briefcase-sized to pocket-sized. And through it all, California Highway Patrol officers were still mounting the same motorcycles their predecessors rode when Reagan was president. Number 17, they replaced European police bikes and changed everything. Before the Kawasaki invasion, American police departments primarily used European motorcycles. BMW was the gold standard. Heavy, reliable, expensive German engineering. Some departments used other European brands too. The shift to Japanese bikes was controversial, really controversial. Old school cops called them rice rockets and toy bikes. They complained about everything from the sound to the seating position. But the Kawasaki's had one massive advantage: price. A department could buy 2 or 3 Kawasaki's for the price of one BMW. Plus, parts were cheaper and more readily available. Maintenance was simpler. The bikes were actually lighter and more maneuverable, despite having similar power. Within a few years, the cultural shift was complete. The image of an American police motorcycle went from heavy German cruiser to sleek Japanese sport bike. It wasn't just about the bikes themselves. It represented a fundamental change in how American law enforcement approached vehicle procurement. Practical economics beat tradition. The success of the Kawasaki police program basically opened the door for Japanese manufacturers to dominate multiple American markets. If it was good enough for cops, it was good enough for civilians. Number 16. They had run-flat tires. Before it was cool. One of the weirdest features of the KZ police bikes was their tires. They came equipped with run-flat technology. On a motorcycle in the 1980s, this was almost unheard of at the time. Even cars rarely had run-flat tires back then. The technology was expensive, heavy, and generally considered unnecessary. But for police motorcycles engaged in high-speed pursuits, it made perfect sense. Imagine chasing a suspect at 90 miles per hour and suddenly getting a flat. On a regular motorcycle, that's potentially fatal. The bike becomes instantly unstable. You're probably going down hard. With run flats, an officer could maintain control and either continue the pursuit or at least pull over safely. The tires were significantly heavier than standard motorcycle tires. They affected handling and acceleration. Some officers complained they made the bikes feel sluggish. But when you're talking about officer safety during pursuits, those trade-offs were worth it. The weird part is that this technology didn't really trickle down to civilian bikes. Even today, run-flat motorcycle tires are extremely rare. It remains mostly a police and military thing. Number 15. Footpegs were replaced with folding floorboards. Instead of regular footpegs like every other sport bike, the police KZ 1000s had folding floorboards, on what was essentially a sport bike. It looked bizarre, like someone grafted cruiser parts onto a racing machine. But there was method to this madness. Officers spent 8 to 12 hours on these bikes. Traditional footpegs would have been torture on long shifts. The floorboards allowed them to shift foot position, reducing fatigue and improving circulation. They could even stand up briefly while riding to stretch. The boards also provided better stability when stopped. Officers could plant their feet more firmly during traffic stops. The wider platform made it easier to balance the heavy bike with all its police equipment. Plus, the folding mechanism meant they could still lean the bike in turns almost as much as with regular pegs. But man, did it change the riding experience. Officers trained on regular motorcycles had to completely relearn their foot positioning. Some never got comfortable with it. The floorboards became one of those love it or hate it features that defined the police riding experience. Number 14. The fairing created the iconic cop bike silhouette. That distinctive fiberglass fairing with integrated pursuit lights wasn't just functional. It literally created what we now think of as the classic American police motorcycle look. Before the KZ series, police bikes looked pretty much like civilian bikes with some lights bolted on. The KZ's massive front fairing changed everything. It was purposefully designed to be immediately recognizable. You could spot one of these bikes from a quarter mile away and know instantly it was a cop. The psychological effect was intentional. The fairing housed the emergency lights, radio equipment, and that massive windshield that officers could duck behind during high-speed runs, but it also served as a visual deterrent. That distinctive shape in your rearview mirror meant slow down now. The design was so successful that even today, decades after the KZ stopped production, police motorcycle fairings still follow the same basic template. When kids draw police motorcycles, they draw that KZ fairing shape. It's become part of our collective visual vocabulary. Interestingly, many officers initially hated the fairing. It made the bikes harder to maneuver at low speeds and added significant weight, but its advantages in highway patrol work eventually won everyone over. Number 13. The electrical system was secretly overbuilt. The charging system on these police models was dramatically overbuilt compared to civilian specs. We're talking about double or triple the standard alternator output. Why? Because these bikes were rolling command centers. They had to power emergency lights, sirens, two-way radios, radar guns, and whatever else departments decided to bolt on. A civilian KZ 1000 had a nice, efficient electrical system perfect for normal riding. The police version was like comparing a household outlet to an industrial power supply. This created some interesting side effects. The bikes ran cooler in traffic because the massive alternator acted like an additional cooling fan. But they were also significantly heavier on the front end. Some officers actually preferred the weight distribution change. The overbuilt electrical system also meant these bikes aged better than their civilian counterparts. 30 years later, many surviving police KZs still have functioning original electrical components. Try finding that on a regular 80s sport bike. The system was so robust that some departments would cannibalize retired bikes just for their alternators and wiring harnesses. Number 12. They could hit over 130 mph while fully loaded. Despite weighing significantly more than civilian models, the KZ1000P could still hit speeds over 130 miles per hour, with all the police equipment, with an officer in full gear. With that massive fairing creating wind resistance, still 130 plus, that's seriously impressive for an 80s motorcycle carrying probably an extra 100 pounds of equipment. The aerodynamics shouldn't have worked, but somehow they did. That big fairing that looked like a barn door actually helped at high speeds. It created a bubble of smooth air that reduced overall drag compared to an exposed rider. Officers reported the bikes were remarkably stable at triple-digit speeds. No wobble, no float, just smooth acceleration right up to top speed. Of course, most departments had policies against actually going that fast, but knowing the capability was there gave officers confidence during pursuits. The weird part is that many modern police motorcycles can't match those speeds. They've gotten heavier and more complex. The KZ found this sweet spot of power, weight, and aerodynamics that's rarely been equaled in police motorcycle design. Number 11. The platform outlived most of its contemporary police gear. By the time the KZ1000P was discontinued in 2005, it had outlasted virtually everything else from its era. Police cars from 1982, long gone. Radios, uniforms, weapons, tactics, everything had evolved multiple times over, but the motorcycles just kept going. Think about the technology gap. Officers in 2005 were carrying digital radios, laptop computers, and GPS units. They were wearing Kevlar body armor and modern helmets. And they were strapping all this 21st century gear onto motorcycles designed when 8-track players were still common. Departments kept buying them because they worked. Simple as that. Why fix what isn't broken? The learning curve for new officers was minimal since the bikes hadn't changed. Parts inventories remained consistent. Mechanics knew every bolt and wire by heart. It was institutional inertia at its finest, or maybe its worst, depending on your perspective. Some officers loved the continuity, others felt like they were riding antiques while criminals drove modern performance cars. The fact that these bikes remained competitive for over 2 decades says something about either how good the original design was, or how slowly police motorcycle technology advanced. Number 10. The police models lived long after civilian versions died. Here's a weird twist of manufacturing fate. The civilian KZ1000 that spawned the police version stopped being a mass-market model way before its cop cousin retired. By the early 90s, Kawasaki had moved on to newer, more advanced sport bikes for civilian riders. The ZX series, the Ninja line, all kinds of sexy new machines. But they kept building 1980s technology for police departments. It was like a time warp on the assembly line. Half the factory building cutting-edge sport bikes with fuel injection and modern suspension. The other half building carbureted relics for cops. The police market essentially kept an obsolete platform alive for an extra decade or more. Without those government contracts, the KZ1000 would have disappeared into history much earlier. This created a bizarre situation where police motorcycles were technologically behind the bikes they were chasing. Criminals on modern sport bikes had significant performance advantages. But departments kept ordering KZs because that's what they knew. That's what their officers were trained on. That's what their maintenance contracts covered. Number 9, they changed the police motorcycle aesthetic forever. The KZ series fundamentally shifted American expectations of what a police motorcycle should look like. Before Kawasaki, police bikes were big, heavy cruisers, Harleys or BMWs with that traditional motorcycle cop aesthetic. The KZ changed all that. Suddenly, police motorcycles looked fast even standing still. They had that aggressive sport bike stance, that forward-leaning urgency. They looked like they belonged on a racetrack, not Main Street. This wasn't just cosmetic, it represented a philosophical shift in law enforcement vehicle selection, function over tradition, performance over presence. The old-school motorcycle cops hated it at first. These weren't real police bikes in their minds. Too Japanese, too modern, too different from what they'd always known. But the public loved them, especially after CHiPs made them famous. Kids wanted toy versions. Adults respected their obvious capability. The sleek Kawasaki became more intimidating than the traditional cruiser, specifically because it looked fast. By the time the KZ series ended, the transformation was complete. Today's police motorcycles, regardless of manufacturer, follow the sport bike template the KZ established. That forward aggressive stance is now standard. The traditional cop on a cruiser image seems almost quaint by comparison. Number 8, they were pop culture gold. After CHiPs. CHiPs turned the California Highway Patrol Kawasaki into an international icon, but the show's influence went way beyond just making the bikes famous. It fundamentally changed how police motorcycles were perceived in popular culture. Before CHiPs, motorcycle cops in movies and TV were usually portrayed as stern, humorless enforcers. The bikes were just transportation. CHiPs made the motorcycles themselves into characters. Every episode featured multiple chase scenes, showcasing the KZ's capabilities. Suddenly, police motorcycles were cool. Kids wanted to be Ponch and John, not because they were cops, but because they rode those amazing bikes. The show created such demand that Kawasaki actually struggled to keep up with police orders. Departments that had never considered motorcycles suddenly wanted fleets of KZs. The pop culture impact lasted decades after the show ended. Even today, when people think 70s or 80s cop show, they picture those distinctive Kawasaki motorcycles. The bikes became visual shorthand for a certain era of American law enforcement. They appeared in countless other productions, always carrying that CHiPs association. The weird part is that CHiPs probably did more for Kawasaki's brand recognition than millions in advertising could have achieved. Number 7. Ex-officers created a collector's market. When departments finally started retiring their KZ fleets, something unexpected happened. Ex-officers bought them up like crazy, not just for nostalgia, but as investments. These cops knew what civilians didn't. These bikes were bulletproof, a properly maintained KZ. Police bike could run basically forever. Plus, they had all that overbuilt equipment that made them unique. The collector market exploded. Suddenly, beat-up old cop bikes were selling for more than they cost new. Complete models with original police equipment became seriously valuable. Lights, sirens, radio mounts, all that stuff. Departments usually stripped off before auction became must-have accessories. Ex-officers formed clubs specifically for KZ police bike owners. They'd meet up in full vintage CHP uniforms, riding restored bikes that looked exactly like they did on patrol. It was nostalgia meets midlife crisis meets investment opportunity. The really weird part is that many collectors had never been cops. They just wanted to own a piece of that CHiPs magic. Some states had to create special laws about civilian ownership of police-styled vehicles because so many people were buying and restoring these bikes to exact police specifications. Number 6, they were built in Nebraska, not Japan. Here's something that surprises most people. These iconic Japanese police motorcycles were actually built in Lincoln, Nebraska, not imported from Japan, not assembled from Japanese parts, built from the ground up in America's heartland. Kawasaki opened the Lincoln plant specifically to serve the American market, but the police bikes became its signature product. There's something beautifully ironic about Japanese motorcycles being built in Nebraska for California cops to ride on television. The Lincoln plant gave Kawasaki serious advantages in the police market: buy American clauses in government contracts, faster delivery times, the ability to customize bikes for specific department requirements without international shipping delays, local parts availability for maintenance. Workers in Lincoln became specialists in police motorcycle production. They knew exactly how to route the wiring for radio equipment, where to reinforce frames for equipment mounting, how to adjust suspensions for the extra weight. These weren't just assembly line workers, they were craftsmen building specialized law enforcement tools. The plant's success with police bikes actually saved it several times from closure. When civilian motorcycle sales dropped, police contracts kept the lights on. Number 5, a sport bike accidentally became a police workhorse. The KZ series was never designed to be a police motorcycle. It started life as a civilian sport touring bike, something for weekend warriors and commuters. The transformation into a police vehicle was completely accidental. Kawasaki built the original Z1 to compete with Honda's CB750. It was meant for civilians who wanted performance without the full racing bike experience. Then, some creative person decided to see if it could work as a police bike. The core design turned out to be accidentally perfect for police work. The inline-4 engine was smooth and reliable. The frame was overbuilt for civilian use, which meant it could handle police equipment weight. The riding position worked for long shifts. Even the maintenance intervals aligned well with department service schedules. It's like Kawasaki accidentally built the ideal police motorcycle while trying to build something completely different. This happens sometimes in engineering. You design for one purpose and accidentally create the perfect solution for something else. The civilian sport bike DNA never fully left though. officers could still feel that sporting heritage when they opened the throttle. That made the bikes fun to ride, which matters when you're on one 8 hours a day. Number 4, BMW eventually won the war. They'd already lost. By the late 90s and early 2000s, the California Highway Patrol started experimenting with BMW motorcycles again, the same BMWs that Kawasaki's had replaced 20 years earlier. The new BMWs were technological marvels compared to the aging KZs. Anti-lock brakes, fuel injection, advanced suspension, heated grips, all kinds of modern features. But here's the weird part. Many officers preferred the old Kawasaki's. The BMWs were objectively better motorcycles. Safer, more comfortable, more capable. But they lacked the character of the KZs. They felt clinical where the Kawasaki's felt alive. The transition was gradual and controversial. Some departments stayed with Kawasaki until the very end of production. Others jumped to BMW immediately. A few tried Harley-Davidson's police models. It created this bizarre period where different shifts might be riding motorcycles from different decades. The BMW return represented technology finally overwhelming nostalgia. But it took over 20 years for that to happen. The fact that 1980s technology remained competitive until 2005 says something profound about the original KZ design, or maybe about how slowly police motorcycle requirements actually evolved. Number 3, the bikes shaped multiple generations of officers. Because the KZ platform lasted 23 years, multiple generations of officers learned to ride on essentially the same motorcycle. A rookie in 1985 and a rookie in 2000 were training on the same basic machine. This created incredible institutional knowledge. Senior officers could teach techniques they'd perfected over decades. Every trick, every quirk, every sweet spot of performance was passed down. Departments developed training programs specifically around the KZ's characteristics. But it also created resistance to change. When departments finally switched to different motorcycles, many officers struggled with the transition. They'd spent entire careers on KZs, their muscle memory, their instincts. Everything was calibrated to those bikes. Some officers reportedly retired rather than retrain on new motorcycles. That seems extreme, but when you've spent 20 years perfecting your craft on one machine, starting over is daunting. The multi-generational connection to these bikes created an almost religious devotion. Officers didn't just ride KZs, they were KZ officers. It became part of their professional identity. Even today, retired cops at motorcycle shows will gravitate toward restored KZ police bikes like they're seeing old friends. Number 2, the Unchanged design became a safety liability. By the late 90s, the KZ's antiquated design was becoming a genuine safety issue. No anti-lock brakes in an era when even economy cars had them. Drum rear brakes when everyone else had moved to discs. Carburetors that could ice up or flood. Suspension technology from the Reagan administration. Officers were essentially riding time machines into modern traffic. Everyone else on the road had stability control, ABS, fuel injection. The performance gap was becoming dangerous. Pursuit policies had to be adjusted because the bikes couldn't safely match modern sport bike performance. Insurance companies started raising rates on departments still running KZs. The bikes that had once been cutting edge were now rolling anachronisms. Yet departments kept using them because replacement costs were enormous. Training entire motor units on new platforms took time and money most departments didn't have. So they kept patching up and rebuilding 20-year-old motorcycles. It was like using muskets in the age of automatic weapons, functional but barely. The safety issues finally forced the transition to modern bikes. But it took far longer than it should have. Institutional inertia is a powerful force. Number 1, they defined an era that can't be replicated. The Kawasaki KZ police motorcycles represent something that can never happen again in law enforcement. A single platform dominating for over 2 decades, becoming a cultural icon through the television, creating multi-generational traditions. Modern procurement processes, safety requirements, and technology advancement cycles make that kind of longevity impossible now. Police motorcycles today are replaced every few years. They're loaded with technology that becomes obsolete quickly. They're specialized tools rather than the simple, overbuilt machines the KZs were. The KZ era was the last time police motorcycles had genuine character. They weren't just tools, they were partners officers bonded with over years of daily use. You can't form that connection with something that gets replaced every 3 years. CHiPs couldn't happen today either. Modern police procedures, liability concerns, and production costs would never allow a show to feature real police motorcycles in weekly chase scenes. The insurance alone would be prohibitive. The KZs existed in this perfect window, advanced enough to be capable, simple enough to be maintainable, produced long enough to become legendary. They weren't just motorcycles, They were the last of their kind. The final chapter in an era when police vehicles could become cultural phenomena through sheer longevity and television magic. And there you have it, that's 20 weird facts about the California Highway Patrol's legendary Kawasaki motorcycles. These bikes weren't just transportation, they were time capsules on two wheels that somehow stayed relevant for over 2 decades. Did any of these facts surprise you? Let us know in the comments below, and tell us your own KZ stories if you've got them. Since you're still here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into the machines that shaped American culture. We'll see you next time when we explore another icon that defined its era.